If someone had told me panic could share a room with relief, I wouldn't have believed it. Arya's skull throbbed like someone had booked a full drumline rehearsal inside it. Her tongue was sandpaper, her mouth sour and dry, and every muscle protested as she inched onto her side. Sun leaked through the flimsy hotel curtains, offensively bright, and her first coherent thought was, "Kill me now." Then her fingers brushed something warm, soft, undeniably human. Her eyes flew open. She turned her head slowly, half terrified, half dreading what she'd see. Tessa. Tessa lay beside her, fast asleep, messy blonde hair fanned like a halo, one hand tucked under her cheek in a childlike curl. And that wasn't even the part that sent Arya's stomach into free fall. It was the sight of the delicate silver band on Tessa's finger, and worse, the matching one on hers. No, 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 no. Arya sat up too fast and the world spun violently. She pressed her palms against her temples, trying to steady herself. Tessa groaned beside her, blinking her eyes open like a confused kitten waking up from a nap. "Arya, why are you yelling? Look at your hand," Arya hissed. "My what?" Tessa lifted her left hand groggy. Her eyes narrowed, then widened in horror. "What the hell is this? I was hoping you could tell me." Arya's voice was thin and shaky. "Because unless I'm hallucinating, we're wearing wedding rings, Tessa." Tessa bolted upright, ignoring the complaints of her hangover. She stared at her hand, then at Arya's, then around the room. "Hey, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and drop a like to help us grow even more. And let me know in the comments, on a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story so far? Your feedback makes all the difference. Where are we?" I think Arya took in the floral wallpaper, the champagne bottle on the floor, the feather boa draped over the TV. Vegas. Vegas. We were in LA yesterday. Yeah. And then we took shots. And then we said we should celebrate your promotion with something wild. And I remember saying something like, "Let's do something we'll never forget." "Oh my God," Tessa whispered. She looked genuinely ill. "Did we?" Arya turned slowly to the nightstand. There it was, a white envelope with gold lettering. She picked it up with trembling hands and pulled out the official-looking paper inside. Tessa leaned over her shoulder as they both read the words aloud. "Certificate of Marriage. Tessa Hart and Arya Quinn. Signed, June 12, 2025. Tessa covered her mouth with her hand. "We got married." "No, we were drunk." "Arya, clearly. Why would we?" "I don't even." Tessa trailed off. Her voice cracked. "What the hell do we do now?" Arya stood, her legs barely steady, and started pacing the tiny hotel room. "We need to undo it. Annul it. There has to be a way, right?" Tessa nodded. "People do stupid stuff in Vegas all the time, right? This can't be permanent." "Exactly. We're not. I mean, this is crazy. We're best friends." "Yeah, just best friends." That silence was sharp, heavy. Something unsaid hung between them. Arya didn't look at Tessa. Couldn't. Not when her pulse was racing and her hands were clammy. She hadn't even processed the fact that they'd shared a bed. Naked. And not just naked. Intimately close. Her body remembered, even if her mind didn't. Tessa's skin against hers. Laughter and whispers and heat. "Do you remember anything?" Tessa asked, voice barely above a whisper. Arya bit her lip. "Flashes like we were laughing a lot, dancing. I think we kissed." Tessa froze. "I think we kissed a lot." Arya dared to glance at her, and what she saw made her breath catch. Tessa's cheeks were flushed. Her eyes darted away. "I'm going to be sick," Tessa muttered, stumbling toward the bathroom. Arya heard the door slam, followed by the sound of running water. She sat back on the bed, heart thundering. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were supposed to wake up laughing about the night before. Maybe teasing each other about their dance moves. Maybe hung over breakfast with greasy pancakes. Not this. Not married. And yet, deep in the pit of her stomach, beneath the panic and confusion, was something else. A flutter, a whisper. What if this wasn't a mistake? The thought made her angry with herself, with Tessa, with the universe. She didn't allow herself to go there. Couldn't because Tessa was her best friend. And Arya had spent years building walls around her heart where Tessa was concerned. Walls made of sarcasm and denial and pretending those moments didn't mean anything. Like that time Tessa held her hand during that horror movie and didn't let go. Or when she cried on Arya's shoulder after her last breakup and Arya had to resist the urge to kiss her hair. This isn't real, Arya reminded herself. This is a drunken disaster. The bathroom door opened. Tessa stepped out, face pale, eyes uncertain. I think we should talk to someone like legal advice or something. Yeah, Arya agreed. First thing, get this an old fix everything right. But neither of them moved. They just stood there staring at each other. The weight of everything unsaid pressing into the space between them. Do you regret it? Tessa asked suddenly. Arya blinked. What? Do you regret marrying me? Arya swallowed hard. I don't know. And that was the most terrifying part of all. The silence between them was deafening as they stepped out of the hotel lobby and into the punishing glare of the Vegas sun. Arya squinted behind her sunglasses, the sharp ache behind her eyes making every movement feel like a personal attack. Tessa walked beside her, equally quiet, clutching the folded marriage certificate like it was a time bomb. They didn't speak until they were halfway down the block. There has to be a quick fix for this, Tessa muttered mostly to herself. Like people get drunk married in Vegas all the time, right? It's like their thing. Sure, Arya replied, voice dry. People also get tattoos of their exes and eat gas station sushi. Doesn't mean it's easy to undo. You're not helping. I'm not trying to. They walked in tense silence until they reached the law office the hotel concierge had recommended. A neon sign buzzed over the door. Quick and easy legal solutions. Inside, the air conditioning was cold enough to make Arya's arms prickle. A bored-looking receptionist handed them a clipboard without even looking up. Fill this out. He'll see you in a few minutes. Tessa and Arya exchanged a glance. Arya took the clipboard and sat scribbling down their information while Tessa paced. You're awfully quiet, Arya said, not looking up, just trying not to panic. Try harder. Why are you being so bitchy? Tessa snapped, stopping in front of her. Arya looked up slowly. Maybe because I woke up married to my best friend and now we're in a strip mall legal office, trying to undo it like it's some bad Craigslist purchase. So, you do regret it? I regret waking up without a single memory of what happened. Yes, right? Tessa said, crossing her arms. Because God forbid we did anything that might have meant something. Arya froze. What does that mean? Nothing, Tessa muttered, turning away. Forget it. Before Arya could press further, a door opened and a balding man in a suit called them in. Ladies, I'm Martin. Come on back. They followed him into a cramped office filled with law books and framed degrees. He gestured for them to sit. So, you two tied the knot last night. Tessa handed him the certificate. Yes, and we like to untie it. Martin chuckled. Happens more often than you'd think. Annulments in Nevada are possible, but not automatic. You'll need to file, state your reasons, and wait for a hearing. Arya frowned. How long does that take? Depends. A few weeks. Sometimes a couple of months. Tessa's jaw dropped. Months? I'm afraid so. Unless you have grounds like fraud or incapacity. We were drunk. Arya cut in. Very drunk. That helps. Martin nodded. But you'll need to swear under oath that you were too impaired to consent. Also, if you consummated the marriage, that might complicate things. Silence. Arya's face turned crimson. Tessa kept her gaze on the floor. We don't remember, she said softly. Martin lifted a brow. Then you'd better figure it out. It matters. Otherwise you might be staring down a divorce, and that's a whole different ballgame. 20 minutes later, they stepped into heat that felt sharper than before. Arya's head spun hangover and all the rest. So we're stuck legally married for at least a few weeks, she muttered. Tessa didn't answer. She chewed her lip, eyes far away. What? Arya asked. I remembered something. Arya stopped. What did you remember? Tessa looked aside. We were in that tiny chapel, laughing. You had on that ridiculous feather bow. I said you looked absurd and you told me I'd better get used to it, because I was marrying you anyway. Arya swallowed. And I said I do, Tessa added. I remember saying it. I remember meaning it. Air rushed out of Arya's lungs. You meant it. Tessa finally met her eyes. Maybe. I don't know. I was drunk, but it felt happy. Like we were happy. Arya studied her for a long beat, then shook her head and started walking again. We need to go home. Arya, I can't do this here. I need to be anywhere else. The flight to Los Angeles was blessedly short. They sat in silence, headphones on, bodies angled away. Arya watched clouds slide by, her chest a snarl of feelings she couldn't name. Back at their shared apartment, avoidance thickened the air. Tessa dropped her bag by the door. I'll take the couch tonight. You don't have to. I want to. Fine. Arya shut her bedroom door. But sleep wouldn't come. Tessa's words kept looping. I remember saying it. I remember meaning it. At 2:47 a.m., she crept to the kitchen for water and froze. Tessa sat in the dark, legs tucked under her, holding the wedding photo the chapel staff had printed and handed them. You kept it? Arya asked. Tessa nodded. It was in my purse. Let me see. Arya took the picture. They were clearly drunk, but radiant. Tessa's eyes crinkled with laughter, Arya leaning toward her, both of them grinning like fools. What if this wasn't a mistake? Tessa whispered. Arya's heartbeat stuttered. Tessa, I'm not saying we stay married, she said. I'm saying maybe we don't erase it like it never happened. You're talking like this was fate. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was just tequila and bad choices. I don't regret it, Tessa said. Arya's head snapped up. What? I don't regret waking up next to you. Not for a second. Arya couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. The words sat between them like a lit match over gasoline. Good night, Tessa murmured, moving past her, then paused in the doorway. Maybe you don't regret it either. Arya had weathered plenty of mortifying moments, liking a 3-year-old Instagram post from a crush, calling a professor mom during finals, getting locked out of her apartment in nothing but a towel. But none of it compared to sitting at Tessa's parents' dining table, wearing a borrowed sundress and a fake smile, while the silver ring on her left hand gleamed under the chandelier like a damn spotlight. So Tessa's mother said, her smile tight as she passed a bowl of roasted carrots. You girls had quite the weekend, huh? Arya almost choked on her wine. Tessa jumped in immediately. Mom, what? I saw your Instagram story. The feathers, the chapel, the champagne fountain. And now you're back with matching rings. Her dad chuckled, clearly more amused. You didn't think we'd notice? Arya forced a laugh. It was spontaneous, romantic, Tessa's mom added. Her voice laced with judgment masked his charm. Not exactly, Tessa said quickly. I mean, yes, but also no. It's complicated. Marriage usually is, her father mused, sipping his wine. Arya wanted to disappear into her seat, preferably melt into the hardwood floors and seep away into the foundation. Tessa's parents had always liked her. She'd been the sweet best friend for years. Sleepovers, holidays, family barbecues. Arya was practically part of the furniture. But now she was the spontaneous Vegas wife, and everyone could feel the shift. So her mother pressed on. Are you girls planning a reception? Or was this just a private thing? Tessa's eyes widened. Oh, no. There's no reception. We're figuring things out. You can say that again, Arya mumbled. The rest of dinner was a blur of clinking silverware and carefully chosen small talk. Tessa kept shifting in her seat. Arya drank too much wine. By dessert, the two of them had exchanged enough meaningful glances to power an entire season of a sapphic drama series. When they finally said their goodbyes and escaped to the car, the silence was suffocating. Tessa gripped the steering wheel like it had personally offended her. I told her not to bring it up. It's fine. It's not fine. Tessa, seriously, it's not like we can pretend nothing happened. People know. Tessa exhaled hard through her nose. Yeah, they do. And they think it's something it's not. And what exactly do you think it is? That silence again. Taut and heavy. The space between them crackled like a live wire. I don't know, Tessa admitted. But I'm tired of pretending it doesn't feel like something. Arya didn't answer. She looked out the window. The city lights blurred past them, soft and golden and utterly indifferent. When they got home, Tessa dropped her keys on the counter and kicked off her heels. I'm getting changed. Arya nodded, watching her disappear down the hall. Her heart was a mess of contradictions. She knew what they were supposed to be doing, focusing on ending the marriage, fixing what happened, going back to being best friends. But her body wasn't cooperating with that plan. Every time Tessa touched her, even accidentally, it felt like static under her skin. Every glance lingered too long. Every silence felt loaded. She poured herself another glass of wine and sat on the couch. Minutes later, Tessa returned barefoot and wearing a tank top and sleep shorts. She hesitated in the doorway. You okay, Peachy? Tessa crossed the room and sat next to her. You've been weird all night. I've been weird. Arya scoffed. You're the one who said maybe this wasn't a mistake. Then went completely silent for 2 days because I didn't want to pressure you. You didn't. You just broke my brain and then ghosted me in our own apartment. Don't be dramatic. You kissed me in Vegas. Tessa looked at her, eyes dark. You kissed me back. I don't even remember it. Liar. Arya set the glass down hard. What do you want from me? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. Arya said a little too loudly. Try me. Fine. Arya turned to face her fully. I've been in love with you for years. Okay. Years, Tessa. And I buried it so deep because you never looked at me like that. I figured you'd never feel the same. And I'd rather have you as a friend than not at all. So, I stayed quiet. I smiled through all your shitty exes and listened to you cry about guys who didn't deserve you. And told myself it didn't matter. But then you go and marry me in Vegas and look at me like you remember every second of it. And I don't know what to do with that. Tessa blinked, stunned. Arya, no. You wanted the truth. There it is, a pause. A long, breathless pause. Then quietly, I do remember. Arya's heart stopped. What? I remember the vows. I remember the way your hands were shaking and how you looked like you were about to bolt. I remember thinking if I didn't kiss you right then, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. Arya was frozen. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Tessa leaned in slowly, giving her every second to pull away. But Arya didn't move. Their lips met in a kiss that was soft and cautious at first, then deepened with every second. It tasted like wine and regret, and years of longing finally unleashed. When they pulled apart, Tessa rested her forehead against Arya's. I don't know what we're doing, she whispered. Me neither, but I don't want to undo it. Arya closed her eyes. I'm scared. Me too, but not of you. The night settled around them, quiet and pulsing with new electricity. They didn't talk about annulments. They didn't talk about plans. They just sat there, hands intertwined, hearts thudding in sync for the first time. The morning after the kiss felt different than the morning after Vegas. There were no champagne headaches, no strange rooms, no surprise wedding rings glinting in the sunlight, just the slow, heavy silence of two women sitting across from each other at the kitchen table. The taste of something irreversible still on their lips. Arya stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, staring into the swirling cream like it held all the answers. Tessa sat across from her, in a hoodie far too big for her own wardrobe. One of Arya's probably with her hair tied up in a kind of messy bun. That always made Arya's brain glitch for a second. Neither of them spoke for what felt like a lifetime. Finally, Tessa broke the silence. Are you freaking out? Arya didn't look up a little. Me, too. Good. So, what do we do now? Arya finally met her gaze. Tessa's expression was soft, cautious, like she was afraid of pushing too hard. Arya sighed, setting the spoon down. I don't know. I meant everything I said last night. But we still have a marriage we didn't plan and a pile of legal paperwork to deal with. And I have no idea what we are now. We're us, Tessa said simply. We've always been us. Arya huffed a laugh. Yeah, but now with more kissing. Tessa's lips twitched. You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not a pause. It's terrifying. Why? Because I've spent years pretending I didn't want this. And now that I have it, I don't know how to hold it without ruining it. Tessa stood and walked around the table. She knelt beside Arya, resting her chin on her thigh. Then we figure out together. Arya didn't say anything. She just cubed Tessa's face and leaned down, pressing a slow, tender kiss to her mouth. Less urgency than the night before, more intention. It was new. And yet it wasn't like they'd done this 1,000 times in some parallel life. Tessa's hand slid up her waist, fingers curling into the hem of her sleep shirt. But Arya pulled back gently. Not yet, she whispered. Tessa blinked. Why not? Because I want the first time I sleep with you to be real, not confused, not tangled up in guilt or fear. I want it to be deliberate. Tessa nodded slowly. Okay, yeah, I can wait. Arya smiled, heart thudding. Thank you. The rest of the day passed in a strange tender haze. They didn't talk about annulments or the future. They cooked breakfast together, danced clumsily in the kitchen to an old pop song, and watched bad movies on the couch under a shared blanket. Every touch felt new. Every look lingered just a second longer than before. But the bubble popped around 5:43 p.m. when the doorbell rang. Tessa looked up from her laptop, brows knitting. You expecting someone? No, Arya said, setting down her mug. Tessa opened the door and froze. Oh, wow. Arya stood behind her and nearly groaned aloud when she saw him. Tall, handsome, smug. Chase, Tessa's ex, the one she'd cried about for 2 weeks straight back in March. Hey, Chase said, grinning like he'd just walked into a rom-com. Surprise. What are you doing here? Tessa asked, clearly stunned. I was in town. Figured I'd stop by, say hi, maybe grab dinner. We're kind of busy, Tessa said, stepping back. Chase's eyes landed on Arya. Hey, Arya? Chase, she said with a tight smile. You're still living together, huh? That's cute. Arya's jaw tightened. We're married now, she said before she could stop herself. Tessa stiffened beside her. Chase blinked, then laughed. Right? I heard something about that Vegas wedding, huh? Yeah, Tessa said, voice flat. It was a blur. Well, I hope it works out, Chase said, though his tone made it sound like he hoped the opposite. But if it doesn't, you know where to find me. He gave Tessa a wink that made Arya want to commit a felony. When he finally left, the apartment door shut with a loud thud. What the hell was that? Arya snapped. Tessa ran a hand through her hair. I didn't know he was coming. I swear. Did you tell him you were married? I didn't even talk to him after March. He winked at you. He winks at everyone. Arya, do you want him back? Tessa's eyes widened. What? Just answer the question. No. God, no. Where is this coming from? From watching you blush while your ex stands in our doorway acting like he still owns part of you. I didn't blush. You did. And even if I did, it's a natural reaction to being ambushed by someone I used to care about. Arya folded her arms. Fine. So, what am I now? Your rebound wife. Tessa stepped forward. Don't do that. Do what? Make me the villain when you're scared. I didn't ask for this either, remember? But I'm trying. I'm here. I'm kissing you and holding you and telling you I don't regret it. So, maybe stop looking for reasons to blow it up. Arya's throat tightened. I'm not trying to blow it up. Then stopped running every time it gets real. The air between them trembled for a long second. They just stared at each other, breathing hard. Then Arya exhaled. I'm sorry. I saw him and panicked. I'm not used to this, to being the one someone chooses. Tessa's voice softened. I choose you every day, even when you're being a paranoid gremlin. Arya laughed, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. Gremlin? A very cute one. Tessa stepped closer, wrapping her arms around Arya's waist. Hey, she whispered. I'm yours. Okay, you don't have to doubt that. Arya melted into her. They stood there for a long time, just holding each other, letting the storm pass. Later that night, curled up on the couch with the city lights flickering outside, Arya whispered, I still want to get the annulment. Tessa looked over. What? I mean, eventually. I just think if we're going to do this for real, it shouldn't be because of a drunk accident. I want to choose it sober. Tessa nodded slowly. So, we'll undo the marriage and see if we end up wanting it again. Exactly. That's terrifying. A little, but also kind of romantic. Arya smiled. Let's hope so. The morning was unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that felt more like a pause than a peace. Arya sat cross-legged on the living room floor, scrolling through her laptop, staring at a legal form titled Annulment Petition, State of Nevada. Her stomach turned just looking at it. It wasn't regret exactly. It was more like grief for something she hadn't even had time to fully understand. So, we're doing this, Tessa said behind her, holding two mugs of coffee. Her voice was soft, careful, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to speak at full volume yet. Arya looked up. Tessa wore a faded band t-shirt that barely covered the tops of her thighs. Her hair was still damp from the shower, her cheeks flushed pink. She looked maddeningly beautiful and married. Yeah, Arya replied. We are. It's the right thing, right? Tessa handed her the coffee and sat down beside her. Their shoulders touched. I think so. I mean, we didn't plan this. We weren't ready. It doesn't feel real. Exactly. A long pause. Tessa took a sip, then cleared her throat. So, listen, I was thinking while we're waiting for the annulment stuff to go through. What if we tried something like what? Dating. Arya blinked. We're married, Tessa. Yeah, on paper. But emotionally we skipped all the steps. First dates, awkward flirting, staring at each other across the table, pretending we're not thinking about kissing. Arya couldn't help but smile. You want to do over? Exactly. A trial run. Real dating, real choices. If it crashes and burns, fine. We'll annul and move on. But if it works, we'll marry properly. Soberly, Tessa added, grinning. Arya studied her for a long moment. You're serious? Dead serious? I want to know what it feels like to fall in love with you the right way. Arya's heart kicked. Okay, she said quietly. Let's date. Their first date was awkward as hell. Tessa picked a sushi place downtown and insisted on pretending they didn't live together. She even texted Arya from across the apartment saying, I'm outside. Come down when you're ready. Winky face like they were teenagers. Arya rolled her eyes, but secretly adored it. Tessa wore a fitted black dress that made Arya's brain short-circuit. Arya went for jeans and a blouse she only saved for special occasions and instantly regretted it when she saw how hot Tessa looked. Over dinner, they laughed aloud and ordered too much sake. They told stories they already knew just to hear them again. They flirted like they'd only just met, exaggerated and playful, but tinged with an undertone of something much heavier, much older. Years of repressed feelings now bubbling to the surface. So, Arya Quinn, Tessa said, sipping her drink, what's your worst date story? Oh, God. I once got ghosted halfway through dinner. Like, literally, she went to the bathroom and just never came back. Shut up. I'm serious. I had to eat the rest of the pasta alone. The waiter felt so bad he gave me free dessert. Tessa leaned forward, eyes sparkling. Okay, I have one. There was this girl who kept talking about her ex the entire night. Like every story started with, my ex used to. I almost fake choked just to leave early. I would have faked a seizure. You're so dramatic. You love it. I do. That last part hung in the air longer than it should have. Arya reached for her glass to hide her expression, but Tessa reached across the table and touched her hand. Thank you, she said softly, for giving this a chance. You make it hard not to. Tessa blushed, and Arya felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Something terrifying and wonderful. After dinner they wandered the city hand in hand, pure rom-com cliché, and maybe it was cliché, but it felt good, real, solid, until Tessa said, "Want to come back to my place?" And they both burst out laughing because her place was their apartment. Still, the walk home buzzed, the air humming between them. Inside, Tessa leaned against the door, caught her lip between her teeth. "Can I kiss you again? I'm pretty sure that's allowed on a first date." Tessa crossed the space into strides and kissed her hard, less tentative, more certain. Arya answered instantly, fingers threading into Tessa's hair, bodies pressing like they'd been waiting forever. They didn't pause or overthink. Arya's hand slid beneath Tessa's dress. Tessa gasped against her mouth. Clothes scattered, one shoe here, a top there. By the time they reached the bedroom, Arya's heart hammered like it might crack her ribs. But this wasn't Vegas, no haze, no alcohol, no blurring at the edges. It was deliberate, unhurried. Every kiss, every breath, every name whispered like something holy. Arya mapped her, the curve of a hip, the way Tessa arched into her touch, the soft, breathless sounds that escaped. Later, Tessa pulled her close, both of them slick with sweat, tangled in sheets. "You're shaking," Tessa murmured. "I'm fine," Arya said, voice unsteady. "Just overwhelmed." "Me too." They lay there for a long while, skin to skin, hearts in rhythm. The quiet wasn't awkward now, it was full, safe, tender. Eventually Tessa whispered, "Can I ask you something? Anything? Do you think this was always meant to happen?" Arya didn't answer at once. She brushed Tessa's hair back and kissed her temple. "Maybe. Or maybe we've finally stopped running from it. I don't want to lose this," Tessa breathed. "You won't." But Arya wasn't entirely sure it was a promise she could keep. Love wasn't only feeling. It was choosing, every day. And even with Tessa warm against her, breath steady and content, a thin thread of fear slipped in, not because she didn't want this, but because she wanted it too much. If it were up to Arya, she'd have stayed there forever, wrapped in Tessa's arms, their world reduced to skin and softness and the whisper of breath on necks, the sensation of finally being exactly where she belonged. But Monday arrived anyway, blunt and inescapable, tugging the rest of life back in. Tessa left early for a staff meeting, pressing a goodbye kiss that still lingered hours later. Arya lay staring at the ceiling, trying to memorize the feeling, until her phone buzzed. Zoe, her closest friend besides Tessa. "Brunch today. I need gossip and I miss your face." Arya hesitated. Zoe didn't know. Almost no one did, aside from Tessa's parents, and that awkward run-in with Chase. The whole Vegas marriage had been a secret they kept inside their walls. But now they were something else. Something new, real or trying to be, sure. She texted back. "Cafe on 5th. You're paying. You owe me for ghosting me all weekend." Arya smiled, then groaned as she dragged herself out of bed. It felt weird getting dressed like a regular person again, putting on makeup, brushing her hair. Her body still felt marked by Tessa, every inch of her remembering, aching, glowing with the memory of that night. At the cafe, Zoe was already seated at their usual corner table, sipping an iced latte and scrolling through her phone. She looked up and grinned. "Look who finally crawled out of the love cave." "What?" Arya froze. "You've got that I got laid and didn't sleep after glow," Zoe said, eyeing her suspiciously. "Spill. Was it the girl from the bookstore?" "Tell me it was the girl from the bookstore." "No," Arya said quickly, sliding into the seat. "God, No. Then who? Arya hesitated, picking at the corner of her napkin. Zoe narrowed her eyes. Wait, why are you being weird? I'm not Arya. Fine. Arya exhaled. It's Tessa. Silence. Then slowly. Tessa who? Very funny. I'm not joking. You're Tessa. Yes. You're married in Vegas. Best friend, Tessa? That one. Zoe's jaw dropped. Are you what? Dating now. Sort of, kind of. It's complicated. Start talking. So Arya did. She told her everything. The wedding, the morning after, the lawyer, the kiss, the decision to try dating. Their first night together. She left out the details, but the tone in her voice was enough for Zoe to fill in the blanks. When she finished, Zoe leaned back in her chair and stared at her for a long time. Wow. Wow. What? I don't know. I always thought you'd end up with her, you know? I didn't think it had happened like that, but I'm not surprised. You're not. Arya, come on. You've been in love with that girl since sophomore year. You used to pretend you weren't staring at her when she'd fall asleep on your couch. During movie nights, you used to talk about her like she hung the damn moon and didn't even realize you were doing it. Arya looked down, cheeks burning. I didn't think she felt the same. And now Arya's voice softened. Now I think she might, but I'm scared it's just timing. That it's all momentum from Vegas and emotions and heat. And once the novelty wears off, you think she'll leave? Arya didn't answer. You think you'll be too much? That landed like a punch because Zoe wasn't wrong. Arya had always been the emotional one, the intense one. The girl who fell too hard and too fast and got burned for it every damn time. She'd made peace with that, or thought she had, until Tessa had kissed her like she wanted to stay. I just don't want to mess it up, Arya whispered. Then don't. It's not that simple. No, it's not. But it's worth it. I'm not used to being chosen, Zoe. You were every day. You just didn't see it. Those words stayed with Arya for the rest of the day, echoed in her head as she rode the train home, as she climbed the stairs to their apartment, as she opened the door and found Tessa standing in the kitchen, barefoot, and singing along to the radio while chopping vegetables. Domestic, ordinary, perfect. Tessa looked up and smiled. Hey, good brunch. Yeah. Did you tell her? Arya nodded. How'd she take it? Better than I thought. Tessa wiped her hands and came closer. You okay? Arya hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why now? Tessa tilted her head. What do you mean? Why kiss me in Vegas? Why tell me you remembered and that you didn't regret it? We were best friends for years and you never once gave me a sign. Tessa looked down, then back up with eyes full of emotion. Because I was scared too. I've loved you for a long time, Arya. But I kept telling myself it was just friendship, that if I pushed I'd ruin what we had. And then you were just there in front of me, in that ridiculous feather boa. And you looked so beautiful, and so you, and I just knew. I couldn't keep pretending. Arya blinked fast, tears threatening. Tessa stepped closer, wrapping her arms around her. I didn't kiss you because of Vegas. I kissed you because I could not kiss you anymore. Arya buried her face in Tessa's shoulder. I don't want to lose this. You won't, even if I'm messy and insecure. And even then, especially then. They stood there in silence, holding each other. Outside, the city moved on without them. But inside that apartment, time felt suspended. Like nothing else mattered except this and them and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that maybe, just maybe, love had always been there, waiting. The sound of the printer whirring filled the apartment like a countdown clock. Arya stared at the final page of the annulment packet as it slid out onto the tray. Crisp and definitive. Black ink, white paper. Her marriage reduced to 10 typed pages and a notary stamp. She didn't know why her hands were shaking. This was what they'd agreed on. Clear the slate. Start fresh. Let the relationship stand on its own without the accidental Vegas vase. But there was something suffocating about seeing it in writing. Tessa came up behind her, wrapping her arms loosely around Arya's waist. That it? Yeah, Arya said softly. All done. Ready to mail. Tessa rested her chin on Arya's shoulder. Then let's do it. Arya nodded but didn't move. Tessa's voice was quieter now. Unless you don't want to. No, Arya replied. We said we would. I know. But just because we said it doesn't mean we can't change our minds. We're not changing our minds, right? A pause. You just look like you're about to cry. I'm fine, Arya. Tessa, it's just paper. No, it's not. It's a choice, and that's okay. But if it hurts, we should talk about it. I don't want to talk right now. Tessa slowly stepped back. Okay. The silence that followed was loud, crushing. Arya hated it. She hated how easily things shifted from warm to distant. How even after everything, after kisses, after confessions, after months of friendship turning into something deeper, it still felt like everything could break with one wrong word. She dropped the papers into the envelope and sealed it with trembling fingers. I'll take it to the post office. Want me to come? No, Arya. I just need space. Okay. Tessa flinched like the words had hit her physically. Okay. The walk to the post office was short, but Arya dragged it out, stopping for a coffee she didn't drink, pacing outside the mailbox like it might swallow her whole. When she finally slipped the envelope in, it felt like a point of no return. It wasn't the end, not technically. The annulment would take weeks, but something about mailing that packet made it real. Made her feel like she just slammed a door on something sacred. When she got home, Tessa wasn't in the living room. The lights were dimmed, her bedroom door shut. Arya stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing, her stomach churning with guilt. The next morning was cold, not weather-wise, but emotionally. Tessa was distant, not angry, just quiet. Her eyes didn't linger like they used to. Her touch was brief, polite. It killed Arya slowly. Do you want to talk about it? She asked over coffee. Tessa shook her head. It's fine. It's not. Arya, you said you needed space. I'm giving it to you. Not like this. Then how? Arya didn't know, and that was the problem. She didn't know how to ask for space without pushing Tessa away. She didn't know how to be in love and terrified at the same time. Days passed like this. Tension in the air, conversation forced. The intimacy that had come so easily before now felt like a minefield. Then came the worst of it, a Friday night dinner with friends. Zoe, Tessa's co-worker Noah, a few others. The energy was high, the wine flowing, everyone laughing. Arya was trying to play it cool, trying not to look at Tessa too much or too little. But Tessa kept leaning away, not touching her. Not even sitting beside her. It didn't go unnoticed. So Noah said, sipping his drink, married life treating you too well? Laughter followed. Arya forced a smile. Tessa's eyes stayed on her plate. We're figuring it out, Arya said. Yeah. Noah raised an eyebrow. You guys seem kind of off tonight. We're fine, Tessa said quickly. But it didn't sound convincing. Arya felt heat rise in her face. We're just tired. Sure, Noah said, clearly not buying it. Zoe shot Arya a worried look. Arya excused herself to the bathroom and stayed there longer than necessary, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Who even was she right now? Some girl playing house with her best friend while coming apart at the seams. That's what she felt like. When Arya returned, Tessa was laughing at something Noah said, eyes bright. Body angled toward him to open, to close, and something twisted hard in Arya's chest. After dinner, back at the apartment, the silence settled again, thick, toxic. You were flirting with him, Arya said. Tessa blinked. What? At dinner? You were practically in his lap. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not. Everyone saw it. Are you serious right now? Are you? Noah is gay. Arya stopped cold. Yeah. Tessa added, so maybe next time you accuse me of cheating, do your research. I wasn't accusing. You kind of were. I'm sorry. You've been distant and I don't know where we stand anymore. You mailed the annulment. We agreed to. And now you're mad that I acted like we're not married anymore? Arya exhaled, unsteady. No. I'm mad because I miss you. Tessa's expression cracked for a heartbeat, then shuddered. I miss you, too. Then why does it feel like we're strangers again? Tessa didn't answer. She turned toward her room, pausing in the doorway. I think we need to slow down. Maybe take a step back. The words landed like a blade. What does that mean? Arya whispered. Less pressure. Fewer expectations. Let things breathe. Arya nodded, numb. Okay. The door closed, and Arya sat in the dark, listening to the sound of distance getting louder. Time moved differently when Tessa wasn't speaking to her, slower, duller. Somehow too loud and too quiet at once. The apartment became a museum of them. The shared blanket slumped on the couch. Tessa's half-empty shampoo in the shower, a pair of earrings abandoned on the nightstand. Arya drifted through it like a ghost. Tessa hadn't moved out, not technically. Her things remained. Her room still smelled like her. Her toothbrush stood next to Arya's. But she might as well have been 1,000 miles away. They hadn't really talked in 4 days. Texts were bare-bones logistics. Late shift. Won't be home for dinner. Sleeping at my sister's this weekend. Arya didn't ask why. She told herself she didn't care. But every time Tessa's name lit her screen, and it wasn't a "can we talk," another small crack opened. Zoe noticed first. She always did. You look like hell, she said bluntly as they sat on Arya's tiny balcony, sipping wine that tasted like nothing. Gee, thanks. You haven't smiled in a week. Haven't had much reason to. Did something happen? Arya hesitated. We pulled back. Tessa and I. Why? Because we were rushing. Because we had no idea what we were doing. Because I ruined everything. Arya, don't. I snapped at her. Accused her of flirting. Pushed when I should have listened. She asked for space, and I gave it. Now it feels like we're on opposite sides of the planet. Zoe was quiet a long beat. You know, she said softly, love isn't a science. No formula. No perfect step-by-step. If you really care, you fight for it, even when it's terrifying. What if she doesn't want me to fight? Then you'll know. But at least you won't spend forever wondering what would have happened if you had. That night, Arya lay awake, phone resting on her chest, Tessa's name glowing at the top of the screen. She didn't text, didn't call, just stared until the display dimmed. The next morning, everything broke. It began like any other dull Saturday. Laundry, dishes, silence. Arya had just sat down with coffee when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Hello. Is this Arya Quinn? Yes. This is Erin Morrison, Tessa's sister. Arya sat up straight. Is everything okay? She's fine mostly, but she was in a minor car accident this morning. What? It wasn't serious. A fender bender, but she hit her head. They brought her to St. Catherine's to be safe. She asked for you. Arya didn't remember getting dressed, didn't remember how she got to the hospital. She just remembered the way her heart felt like it was tearing open with every step. Tessa, hurt, alone, asking for her. The nurse led her down a hallway, and when she stepped into the room, everything else fell away. Tessa was propped up in a bed, bruised, but breathing, a bandage at her temple. Her eyes widened the second she saw her. Arya? Hey, Arya said, voice cracking. She rushed forward, grabbing her hand. You scared the hell out of me. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just Jesus. What happened? I wasn't paying attention. Light changed faster than I thought. Some guy clipped the back of my car. Are you okay? Tessa nodded, wincing. Yeah, just sore. And my ego is a little bruised. You called me. Of course I did. I thought you didn't want to talk. Tessa looked at her with something unreadable in her eyes. I didn't want to fight. There's a difference. Arya sat down at the edge of the bed, her hand still wrapped around Tessa's. You could have called anyone. I didn't want anyone else. Silence settled over them, heavy but not hostile. more like a weight they'd both been carrying finally finding the floor. I missed you, Arya whispered. I missed you so much I couldn't breathe. Tessa blinked quickly. Me, too. Then why did we let it get so far? Because we were scared. Because we've always been scared. I'm tired of being scared. Me, too. Arya brushed a piece of hair from Tessa's forehead. Gentle. Don't ever do this again. Okay. No more car crashes. No more disappearing. No more silence. Tessa added. Deal? Tessa gripped her hand tighter. Can I ask you something? Anything? Do you still want the annulment? Arya hesitated. I don't know. I wanted it because I thought it was the responsible thing, the right thing. But now it feels like we were trying to untie something that was never meant to be undone. I don't want to lose you, Arya. Then don't let go. Tessa exhaled slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. You drive me insane. Right back at you. And I love you. Arya's breath caught. Say it again. I love you. She didn't hesitate this time. I love you, too. When they kissed, bruised, breathless, and terrified, it wasn't the reckless heat of Vegas or the sweet intoxication of their first date. It was something steadier, solid, real. It tasted like forgiveness, like home. They stayed in that hospital room for hours, wrapped up in each other and words that should have been spoken weeks ago. When Erin returned, she smiled knowingly. Guess I'll leave you two alone. And for the first time in days, Arya believed they could make it. Not because it would be easy, not because they had it all figured out, but because Tessa had called her, and that meant everything. Arya had never liked paperwork. She hated forms, deadlines, anything with boxes to fill and signature lines to second guess us. But sitting at the kitchen table with Tessa beside her, staring at the manila envelope that contained their annulment process was on another level. She hadn't touched it since the hospital. Neither Tinha. It sat there like a sleeping animal, daring them to wake it. We should do something with that, Tessa said softly, chin resting on her palm. Her other hand linked with Arya's beneath the table. Probably, Arya replied. But neither of them moved. The envelope had once felt like an act of control. Now it felt like a betrayal. What if we just let it expire? Tessa said. Forget about it. We can't, Arya replied. We need to choose one way or another. Tessa nodded. I want to choose you officially, not just emotionally, not just behind closed doors. For real. Arya looked up at her. That means telling people. All of them. I know your job, your friends, your sister, everyone we've been lying to since Vegas. Then let's stop lying. Arya took a deep breath. Okay, let's do it. It started with Zoe. Always Zoe. Arya invited her over under the guise of wine and updates. But the minute Tessa opened the door with 2 glasses and a smile that looked suspiciously domestic, Zoe raised an eyebrow. So, you two are what now? Roommates with benefits or something more legally binding? We're staying married, Tessa said bluntly. Arya blinked. You want to lead with that? Rip the band-aid off. Damn, Zoe muttered, sitting down. Okay. Well, congrats. I guess I'm not shocked. You're not? Arya asked. I'm insulted it took you this long to figure out what literally every other person in your life already suspected. Tessa laughed. Arya covered her face with her hands. We're telling everyone else this weekend, Tessa said. There's a party at Noah's. You'll be there. Wouldn't miss it. That night, as they curled into bed, together in Arya's room now, as if they'd silently decided the line between them no longer existed, Tessa whispered. You scared, terrified, still want to do it? More than anything? Then we'll be scared together. The party was louder than Arya would have liked. A rooftop event, warm air, fairy lights strung across the sky, and far too many people from both their lives packed into one place. Tessa looked like confidence personified. High-waisted jeans, sleeveless blouse, her hair in that half-up way that drove Arya crazy. Arya, on the other hand, Felt like she was walking into a battlefield with nothing but a smile and a drink in her hand. "You okay?" Tessa murmured as they stood near the edge of the rooftop, watching the city glow below them. "I will be. We don't have to make it a spectacle, but we should make it real." Agreed. It happened naturally, not like a big announcement, not some grand speech, just a series of moments. Tessa resting her hand on the small of Aria's back as they moved through the crowd. Tessa introducing her not as my friend, but as my wife. The stunned faces, the raised eyebrows, the slow understanding. People came up in clusters after that. Noah hugged them both so hard he spilled someone's beer. Tessa's boss raised her glass and said, "Well, it's about time." Even Tessa's ex, the first one from back in college, was there and nodded at Aria with a strange sort of respect. But it wasn't until later, when the crowd had thinned and the sky had darkened fully, that Tessa truly did it. Zoe had managed to get the Bluetooth speaker and connected her phone, playing some slow indie cover of a classic pop song. People swayed, some danced, some just watched the lights. And Tessa took Aria's hand in front of everyone. "Dance with me." Aria blinked. "Here. Yes, right here. Tessa, please." Aria let herself be pulled into the center of the rooftop. The music was slow and soft. The air smelled like wine and wind. They were surrounded by people they knew, colleagues, acquaintances, friends, strangers. But when Tessa wrapped her arms around her, nothing else mattered. "This is terrifying," Aria whispered, "but it's also the bravest thing I've ever done." Tessa leaned her forehead against Aria's. "Me too. Do you regret anything?" "Only that I didn't do this years ago." "I love you," Aria said because she couldn't hold it anymore. Tessa smiled. "Then marry me again." "What? One day? Not in Vegas. Not drunk. Not by accident." Aria's breath hitched. "You're serious? I want to choose you for real." In front of everyone in a white dress with vows we remember. Aria felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Okay. Yeah. I want that, too." The music swelled around them. The world blurred and softened. People smiled. Someone took a photo. Later, Aria would see it. Her laughing into Tessa's neck. Tessa holding her like something precious. Their bodies lit by string lights and starlight and something that looked an awful lot like forever. But in that moment, all she knew was the warmth of Tessa's touch and the sound of her voice saying, "We're not an accident. We're a beginning." The morning after the party was soft in a way that made Aria's chest ache. The light filtered through the curtains with lazy affection. The apartment was still and warm, and Tessa's body was curled around her like she belonged there. Like she'd always belonged there. Aria traced slow circles on the inside of Tessa's wrist, memorizing the texture of her skin. Every breath, every heartbeat between them felt earned. "You're staring," Tessa murmured, voice raspy from sleep. "I'm allowed," Aria whispered. "You proposed. Technically, I just suggested a hypothetical future where we get married again. You're the one who said yes. Still counts." Tessa smiled, eyes still closed. "Then I guess I'm officially engaged to my wife." Aria laughed and buried her face against Tessa's shoulder. "God, we're weird. We're perfect." But perfection was fragile. And mornings, no matter how sweet, always ended. By afternoon, reality came knocking. Not metaphorically. It was an actual knock. And it was Tessa's sister. Erin stood in the doorway with a manila envelope and a complicated expression. "Hi, am I interrupting?" "Always," Tessa muttered, but stepped aside. Erin glanced between them, noting the closeness. The familiar way Tessa's hand rested on the small of Aria's back. "So, it's official now." "Yeah," Tessa said. "We're staying married." Erin exhaled slowly. "Well, that's a twist. Are you mad?" "No," Erin said. "I'm processing, but I'm not mad." She handed over the envelope. The annulment papers were returned. Final confirmation from the court came through yesterday. Tessa blinked. "Wait, so it's done legally?" "Yeah. You're not married anymore." The silence that followed was suffocating. Arya felt the air leave her lungs. Oh, she managed. Tessa just stared at the envelope in her hands. I thought we had more time. Aaron looked between them. Did I miss something? We decided not to go through with it, Tessa said quietly. We were going to stop the process. Too late, Aaron said. I'm sorry. After she left, the apartment felt colder, emptier, like the loss had echoed through the walls. So Arya said after a long stretch of silence, we're officially not married. Tessa sank onto the couch, staring at nothing. It feels weird. It feels wrong. We can fix it. I know, Arya said. But it still hurts because we didn't get to choose. Not yet. The next few days were strange, like drifting between realities. Technically, they were single. Emotionally, they were deeply entangled. Legally, they had nothing tying them together anymore. But in every way that mattered. They were still each other's, still sharing a home, a bed, a life. Tessa started jokingly referring to Arya as her fiancé. Arya secretly loved it, but the pressure began to build. Not between them, not directly, but around them. Friends asking when the real wedding would be. Tessa's mom calling, suddenly interested in guest lists. Work schedules clashing, dishes piling up, life creeping in. It all came to a head one Thursday night when Arya got home late from a shoot, exhausted, only to find Tessa pacing in the kitchen with a wedding planning binder open on the counter. Hey, Arya said, dropping her bag. What's all this? I was just looking for fun. Arya walked over, glanced at the photos of venues, color schemes, cake samples. You're stressed. I'm fine, Tessa. I just want this to be perfect. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it does because this time it counts. This time people will be watching. This time it's not a joke in Vegas. You think that's what it was to me? Tessa froze. No, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I meant I'm scared, Tessa said, voice cracking. I'm scared that if we do this again, in the light in front of everyone, it'll fall apart. That will ruin it. So instead of enjoying what we have, you're trying to control it. Tessa recoiled. Wow. I'm just saying I'm trying, Arya. I'm trying so hard. But maybe that's not enough for you. Don't put this on me. I'm not. God, I don't know. Arya exhaled shakily. This doesn't have to happen right now. The wedding. I mean, we just got back to each other. I know. Let's not ruin it by rushing again. Tessa nodded, tears brimming. Okay, no rushing. Just us, day by day. Tessa crossed the space between them and pulled her into a tight hug. Day by day. And they meant it. But still, some part of Arya couldn't shake the feeling that the first time they got married, impulsively, drunkenly, with no plans and no pressure, had been easier because there hadn't been anything to prove. Now, with the world watching, with every eye expecting perfection, every tiny crack felt dangerous. She wanted forever with Tessa. She just didn't want forever to break them before they got there. The job offer came on a rainy Tuesday, tucked between a string of spam emails and an unread newsletter from her old photography class. Arya almost missed it. The subject line was too vague. Opportunity. Please respond within 48 hours. She opened it without thinking, one hand holding a slice of toast, the other barely alert. The name at the bottom stopped her heart. Aurora Creative, one of the biggest creative agencies in New York. She read the message 3 times. Then again, they were offering her a 6-month contract. Our direction, full creative control, twice the salary she currently made, a place to stay included. Travel covered. The kind of opportunity she used to dream about before everything became complicated and beautiful. And entangled with Tessa. She stared at the screen until the toast went cold in her hand. Tessa was out running errands. Arya felt the weight of the silence press in around her. She should be happy. This was everything she had worked toward. And yet her chest had. When Tessa came home, umbrella dripping, cheeks pink from the wind, Arya barely managed to look at her. Hey, Tessa said, hanging up her coat. You okay? Yeah, just got an email. Tessa tilted her head. Bad news. No, the opposite. Actually. Arya slid the laptop across the table. Tessa read in silence. Her face was unreadable. When she looked up, her eyes were wide. Arya, this is incredible. I know it's Magnolia. You've talked about them for years. I know. So, it's in New York. 6 months. Yes. When would you leave? 2 weeks. A beat stretched thin. Tessa sank into a chair, hands clasped. Do you want to go? I don't know, Arya whispered. I don't want to leave you. That's not what I asked. Arya's throat tightened. I think I do want to go, but I don't want to hurt you. Tessa reached across the table, taking her hand. Arya, I love you. I'm not going to be the reason you pass up your dream. If you really want this, we'll figure it out. Long distance. We've survived worse. But what if it changes us? Then we let it together. Tears pricked, but Arya held them back. Are you sure? Absolutely. I'd rather miss you for 6 months than watch you miserable because you stayed for me. The next day's blurred paperwork, calls, contracts. Tessa packed with her, labeling boxes, making lists, promising to water the plants. They didn't touch the goodbye until the night before the flight. Curled in bed, sheets twisted, the room thick with everything unsaid. I don't want to go, Arya breathed. But you are. I wish you could come. Me too. But I've got the museum project, and Aaron needs help with the twins. And it's only 6 months. That's a long time. Not if we trust it. I trust you. Good, because I trust you, too. They made love slowly, like they were engraving memory into skin. Arya learned the weight of Tessa's breath, the curve of her back, the way her name sounded like a promise against her neck. Morning came quiet. The taxi waited. Bags zipped. Only the kiss remained long, soft, aching. Write to me, Tessa said, voice thick. Every day, Arya promised. Send photos. Only the inappropriate ones. Tessa laughed, wiping her eyes. Go before I lock you in the closet. I love you, Arya said. I love you more. And then she was gone. The plane climbed. Clouds swallowed the city. Arya leaned on the window and wondered if love could stretch coast to coast without ripping. New York was fast, ruthless, demanding, and exhilarating. She dove into the job. She built campaigns, shot covers, made calls like a boss. She was good at it. But nights in the quiet Magnolia apartment hit harder than she'd expected. Tessa's texts came with the morning pictures of breakfast, the cats, selfies in bed with snarky captions. Arya answered with city snapshots, cab voice notes, doodles on napkins. It helped until it didn't. Distance snuck in. Missed calls, slow replies. One day slipped to 2, then 3. The quiet hurt worse than the goodbye. After 3 days, Arya broke. She called, heart hammering. Tessa answered on the 4th ring. Hey, hi, sorry it's been. Aaron had to travel, and I've got the kids. And Tessa. Silence. Do you still want this? Arya asked. Do you still want us, a beat? More than anything, Tessa said softly. Then why does it feel like I'm the only one holding on? Because I'm scared, Arya. Of what? Of forgetting what it feels like to be near you. Of waking up one day and realizing you don't miss me anymore. Arya's voice broke. I miss you every second. Then come home when it's over. Please. You'll still be waiting. Always. That night, they fell asleep with the phone line open, not talking, just listening. Breath to breath, heart to heart. And for now, it was enough. Arya hadn't realized how quiet love could be. In the beginning, it had been thunder, Vegas lights, laughter, breathless kisses under neon skies. Then it was heat, bodies tangled, hearts pounding, whispered promises between walls that knew too much. Then it had been routine. Coffee in the morning, kisses in the doorway, Tessa's socks mysteriously vanishing into her drawers. And now love was silence, measured, waiting. Arya's life in New York had become a rhythm she never fully sank into. She performed it perfectly, even shoots, meetings, press, emails, applause. Her work was thriving, her name starting to mean something in places she'd only dreamed about. But in the quiet moments on elevators, in cold showers, alone on subway benches, she felt the weight of what she'd left behind. And the emails kept coming. Magnolia wanted to extend her contract. Another 6 months, more money, a team of her own, a gallery exhibit. Everything she thought she'd been working toward. But instead of excitement, all she felt was dread. Tessa hadn't brought up the end of the contract in weeks. Neither of them did. Not even when their nightly calls turned into occasional texts. Not even when the time difference became an excuse to sleep early. And not even when Arya stopped sending selfies and Tessa stopped asking for them. Until one morning, 97 days after she landed in New York, Arya opened her inbox and found the subject line she'd been dreading. Contract extension offer. Final confirmation needed. She stared at it for a full hour. Didn't click. Didn't respond. She called Tessa instead. Voicemail. She waited. Called again. Nothing. Her throat tightened. She typed out a message. Hey, got the extension offer. Can we talk? The reply didn't come until the next day. I'm not sure what to say anymore, Arya. That was it. No punctuation, no emojis, just those words. Arya stared at them until the room blurred. Later that night, she FaceTimed Zoe instead because hearing a familiar voice was better than drowning in the silence. You look like hell, Zoe said. Thanks. You talked to her, if you can call that talking. What happened? I think I waited too long. I think she's tired of holding space for someone who isn't there. But you love her. I do. Then why are you still there? Because I worked for this. Because I thought success would fix something in me. And did it? Arya couldn't answer. Zoe sighed. She still loves you, Arya. But she's breaking. Meanwhile, back in LA, Tessa sat curled up on the couch in one of Arya's old hoodies, barely eating, barely responding to Aaron's calls. The house was too quiet, the bed too cold, the memory of Arya too loud in every corner. Aaron stopped by with the twins one afternoon, hoping the noise would shake her out of it. Instead, Tessa ended up in the bathroom, crying with the water running so the kids wouldn't hear. Aaron waited until she came out red-eyed and quiet. You need to talk to her, she said gently. What's the point? You love her. She chose New York. She chose herself. That's not the same thing. I don't know if I can keep waiting. Aaron wrapped an arm around her. Then tell her that. Don't just fade. Tessa nodded, but the fear stayed in her chest. That night, she sent one more message. I don't want to stop loving you, but I can't keep loving you alone. Arya saw it while standing on the edge of a rooftop, the city blinking below her. She hadn't cried in weeks. She sobbed. The next day, she called her manager, turned down the extension, packed her bags, told the studio she had a family emergency. They were disappointed but polite. She didn't care. Her heart beat louder with every mile back to LA. When she landed, it was raining again. She hadn't told Tessa she was coming. She just got in a cab, asked the driver to take her home. The lights were on. She knocked. No answer. Her heart sank. Then the door opened. Tessa stood there barefoot in sweatpants and a worn hoodie, eyes wide and shining. Hi, Arya said, soaked and shaking. Hi, I didn't sign the extension. I saw your email. I want to be here. I want you. Only you. Tessa stared at her, lips trembling. You're really back for good. Arya, you said you couldn't keep loving me alone. You don't have to. I'm here. I choose you. Not just in Vegas. Not just when it's easy. Every damn day. Tessa broke. Tears fell. Arms wrapped around Arya. Mouths met. Nothing else mattered. They stood there on the threshold of 1,000 unspoken apologies and 10,000 new beginnings. Let's try again, Arya whispered. No more halfway. No more pauses. Let's build this for real. No contracts, no courts, just us, just love. And this time, they meant it. For a few days, everything felt like a dream. The kind you don't question while you're in it. The kind where everything is softer, quieter, suspended in golden light. Arya moved through the apartment like someone relearning her own name, her own home. Tessa watched her like a storm survivor, counting every breath of calm before the next wave hit. They were cautious, tender with their words, gentle with their touches. They made breakfast together, folded laundry side by side, fell asleep tangled in the sheets like they hadn't spent almost for months an entire country apart. And yet, even in all that softness, there was something under the surface, unspoken, waiting. Because real life doesn't pause for romance, and love doesn't erase what distance reveals. On the 5th morning after Arya's return, she found Tessa in the kitchen staring at the wedding binder she hadn't touched in weeks. Arya leaned on the doorway. "You kept that." Tessa didn't look up. "I couldn't throw it out." "Planning again?" "No, I don't know. I just needed to see it. Needed to remind myself that we wanted this once before everything got so hard." Arya walked over and gently closed the binder. "I still want this, but we don't have to prove anything to anyone, not even ourselves." "Don't you think we do?" Tessa said quietly. "Everyone knows now. Our friends, my family. They saw us dancing on that rooftop. Heard the word wife come out of my mouth. If we break again, it won't be quiet this time. It'll be a mess. Public and painful." Arya took her hand. "Are you scared we're going to fall apart?" "I'm scared we never really healed. That we just pressed play again and hoped it would sound like a new song." "Then let's talk, Tessa. Let's stop tiptoeing." Tessa pulled away slowly. "Okay, then let's talk." And it started. At first, it was quiet questions they hadn't dared ask while apart. "Did you ever think about staying in New York? Did you think I'd move on? Were you angry I didn't visit?" Then it turned sharper. "You didn't call for 4 days," Arya said. "I was scared," Tessa replied. "I didn't know if I could survive hearing your voice when I didn't know if you'd come home. So, you shut down." "So, did you? I didn't know how to be with you from 3,000 meters away." "But you didn't try, Arya. You buried yourself in work. You chose a life I wasn't in. I chose a future, and I wanted you in it. I still do, but you never said that. Not once. Not clearly. Because I didn't think I had the right." Arya's voice cracked. "Because I left. I left, Tessa, and I didn't want to ask you to wait when I wasn't sure I'd be brave enough to come back." "Then why did you come back?" "Because not loving you was harder than leaving New York." Silence fell again, this time thick with grief, not anger. Tessa sat down slowly at the kitchen table. Her hands trembled. "Sometimes I feel like I'm holding on to a version of us that only exists in memory. Like we had this perfect moment in Vegas, and everything since then has just been us trying to make it feel real." Arya knelt in front of her, resting her chin on Tessa's knee. "Do you want it to be real?" "I want it. I just don't know if it's enough." "Then let's build it from the ground up. No weddings, no Instagram captions, no labels for a while if we don't want them. Just us choosing each other." Tessa's eyes filled. "And if we break again, then we break honest. But I won't walk away without trying. Not this time." They didn't talk much the rest of the day. But that night, Arya curled against Tessa in bed, their legs intertwined, and whispered, "Can I tell you something stupid? Always. I still wear the ring." Tessa pulled back just enough to look at her. Arya reached for the chain around her neck and revealed the small silver band, resting against her collarbone. "I took it off my finger, but I never let it go." Tessa's breath hitched. "I have mine, too," she whispered. "Drawer by the bed. I look at it when I think I'm losing you." Arya cubed her face. You're not losing me. I'm here and I'm going to stay." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other. Two people still learning how to forgive themselves for needing time, for needing space. for not getting it right the first time. In the morning, Tessa woke up first. She kissed Arya's shoulder, made coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table with the wedding binder again. This time, she didn't open it. She just stared at the cover for a long time, then placed a sticky note on top. It read, "Not now, but maybe one day." When Arya found it, she smiled through tears and stuck another note beneath it. "Let's build the life first. The ceremony can wait." Tessa read it that night and whispered, "Okay," and for now, that was more than enough. The invitation came in a pale pink envelope sealed with gold foil and a handwritten address. That made Arya's stomach twist before she even opened it. Tessa wasn't home. She was at the museum curating a new exhibit, texting Arya sporadically about weird artist demands and coffee disasters. So when Arya slid the invitation from its envelope and saw the name at the top, she was alone. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Camila Ortiz and Sienna Blake." Sienna, her ex. The one she never talked about. The one Tessa had never met. The one who had 2 years earlier nearly broken her in half. Arya stared at the script for a long time before setting it aside and walking to the window needing air. It wasn't the fact that Sienna was marrying someone else. That part didn't hurt. Not anymore. What hit her was the timing. The way life loved to pull the past into the present just when you thought you were finally safe. Tessa came home that night humming to herself and kissed Arya on the cheek as she walked in. Then immediately noticed the envelope on the counter. "What's that?" "Wedding invite," Arya muttered. Tessa opened it. Her eyebrows lifted. "Sienna." Arya nodded. Tessa said nothing for a moment, then handed the invitation back. "Are you going?" "I don't know. She sent it, which is weird. We haven't spoken since we broke up, and that was ugly." Arya laughed dry, messy, painful. "Not something I want to relive." Tessa sat across from her, expression unreadable. "Do you still have feelings for her?" "God, no. Not even a little. But I'd be lying if I said she didn't leave marks." "Then maybe it's worth going. Close the door properly. You'd be okay with that. I trust you. And we've done the whole not talking about the hard stuff thing before. I don't want that anymore." Arya took her hand, grateful and uncertain all at once. "Would you go with me?" Tessa paused, then nodded. "Yeah, I think I should." The wedding was 2 weeks later. A beach ceremony, champagne and candlelight and silk tablecloths. Arya wore navy blue. Tessa wore black. They looked good together. Dangerous, even like a pair of secrets someone dared to invite into polite company. When they arrived, Sienna's eyes caught Arya's across the crowd immediately. She looked surprised, then pleased, then something else, something unreadable. Arya kept her hand in Tessa's the entire time. They greeted guests, accepted compliments, smiled for cameras. But Tessa was quiet, too quiet. And Arya noticed. When the ceremony started, she glanced over to see Tessa staring at the couple at the altar. Not with joy or sentimentality, but with something colder, guarded, distant. When Sienna and Camila kissed, and everyone applauded, Tessa clapped, too, politely. But she didn't smile. At the reception, the champagne flowed fast. Tessa drank, not heavily, but enough that Arya could feel the change in her. Her laugh got sharper, her silence deeper. When Sienna approached their table, it was inevitable. "Arya," she said warmly, "I'm so glad you came." Arya stood, smiled politely. "Congrats. You look radiant." "Thanks. And this must be Tessa." "Yes," Tessa said, standing and shaking her hand. "The wife, for now." Sienna blinked. Arya's stomach dropped. "Tessa," she said quietly. But Tessa kept smiling. "Don't mind me. It's just funny life. I mean, all this messy timing. But hey, what's a wedding without a little emotional subtext?" Sienna looked politely uncomfortable. "Well, enjoy the party." She walked away quickly. Arya turned to Tessa, fury building behind her ribs. What the hell was that? I don't know, Tessa said, taking another sip of champagne. Maybe I'm just wondering what it's like to be the one watching instead of being watched. You're not making sense, aren't I? Because it feels pretty clear to me that you still have a knot in your stomach with her name on it. That's not fair. Neither is this. This us being here smiling and nodding while you stare at someone who nearly broke you. Pretending I don't see the way it still haunts you. Arya's voice dropped. Tessa, I'm with you. Then why do I feel like I'm in a room I was never invited into? Because you're scared just like I was in New York. That shut her up for a second. I didn't come here to hurt you. Arya said softer now, but we said we'd face our stuff. And yeah, maybe I needed to come here and see her. Not because I want her back, but because I wanted to know that I didn't. And I don't. I only want you, but I can't prove that if you've already decided to be angry. Tessa set her glass down hard enough to make it tremble. I'm not angry. I'm scared that I'll never be enough for the version of you that's still recovering from her. Then let me show you that you already are. They didn't dance. They didn't stay for cake. They walked along the shoreline after the speeches, barefoot, the water cold and biting. The silence between them finally softened. Tessa stopped walking and looked out at the ocean. I think the hardest part about loving you, she said, is knowing I don't get to rewrite your past. I just have to trust that your future belongs to me. It does, Arya said, but only if we stop fighting ghosts. Tessa looked at her. Then come home. Really, come home with me. Let's leave this behind. Lead the way. That night, they made love slowly, like the only language they had left was forgiveness. And in the dark, when sleep finally came for them, they held each other with the kind of desperation that only comes from knowing how easily something precious can break. In the morning, neither one of them spoke of Sienna, or the way Tessa had flinched when Arya's name left her mouth, or the way Arya had cried quietly in the bathroom, afraid that no matter how deep she buried it, the past would always find its way back. They didn't need to because they had survived it together. The sun filtered through the window in long golden streaks, spilling over the hardwood floor and casting soft light across the open boxes. Stacked near the couch, Arya sat cross-legged on the rug, surrounded by picture frames and coffee mugs and too many tangled charging cables to count. Tessa stood in the kitchen barefoot, hair twisted up lazily, singing along off-key to a playlist Arya had made years ago. Their apartment smelled like coffee and toast and the faintest trace of lilac from the candle burning on the windowsill. It didn't look like a palace. It didn't look like a fairy tale. But it felt like home. Real solid chosen. You're putting the mugs in the wrong cabinet, Tessa called, not looking up. You're micromanaging, Arya called back. I'm curating. You're annoying. And you're lucky I'm still here. Tessa grinned, leaning on the counter. You really think I'm lucky? Every second. Arya stood, walked over, and wrapped her arms around Tessa's waist. Even when you boss me around and steal the last piece of Sordo, especially then. You're disgusting. You're in love with me. Tessa smiled. I really am. The move had been Tessa's idea after everything. The distance, the fights, the fear. They'd realized that what they needed wasn't another grand gesture or dramatic moment. It was space together, a new chapter, one that didn't live in the shadow of Vegas or New York or past relationships. So, they'd found a place on a quiet street lined with trees that turned gold in autumn. It had creaky floors and terrible parking, but Arya fell in love with the windows, and Tessa fell in love with the garden out back. And just like that, they signed the lease and began their real life. No labels, no rush, just them choosing each other every day. Zoe helped them paint the living room and left tequila in the fridge as a symbolic offering. Tessa's sister dropped off mismatched dishes and threatened to visit often. And slowly, the apartment filled with life. Art on the walls, plants they both forgot to water, books they kept rereading out loud to each other in bed. One evening, about 2 weeks into their new routine, Arya came home with paint in her hair and a stack of new photos from a local shoot. Tessa was sitting on the balcony, legs tucked under her, sketching something Arya couldn't see. Busy? Arya asked. Always. Tessa held up the sketch pad. It was a rough drawing of a room. Bare walls, hardwood floor, to women dancing barefoot in the middle of it. No faces, just bodies in motion. Love in motion. That's us, Arya asked. I hope so. You're so dramatic. Takes one to love one. Arya walked over, kissed her forehead, and dropped the photo stack in her lap. Prints came in. Tessa flipped through them slowly, then stopped. What's this? It was a photo Arya had taken by accident, or maybe instinct. Tessa sleeping, lips parted slightly, the sunlight catching the edge of her collarbone. Peaceful, intimate, real. You took this, Tessa whispered. I always take pictures of the things I don't want to forget. Tessa looked up. Her eyes were too soft, too full. You don't have to remember me. I'm not going anywhere. Say that again. I'm not going anywhere. Arya cubed her face, kissed her long, deep, certain. That night, after dinner, after music, after laughter so loud the neighbors probably hated them, they sat on the living room floor with the last box between them. It was labeled Vegas. Inside, the feather boa, the cheap plastic champagne flute, the wedding photo, the original rings. Arya held one of them up. Remember this? Tessa nodded. I remember everything. Do you ever wish we'd waited? Tessa thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, we needed to be reckless once. It got us here. Here's pretty damn good. It is. Tessa reached for something in her pocket. A small box. Simple velvet. Arya stared. What is that? Calm down. It's not what you think. Tessa opened it. Inside the Sam ring from Vegas. Polished, slightly resized. Placed back in its little cradle like it belonged there. I don't want to plan anything right now, Tessa said. Not a wedding. Not a ceremony. Not a hashtag or a dress or a cake. Okay. But I want you to wear this. Not because we signed anything. Not because we owe anyone proof. Because every morning I choose you and I want the world to know it. Arya stared at the ring. You're proposing without proposing. I'm reclaiming what we already knew, Tessa said. We weren't a mistake, we were early. Tessa, say yes. Arya didn't say yes. She didn't say anything. She kissed her so fiercely they toppled to the floor. Breathless, tangled, laughing. When they finally stilled, Arya picked up the ring and slid it onto her finger. There, she whispered, right where it belongs. Tessa rested her forehead to hers. Think we'll ever get tired of this? Of loving each other? Of waking up to it? Never. They didn't remarry. Not yet. They didn't have to. Some love doesn't need an audience, it simply exists. Theirs was steady, bright, unfinished, exactly the right kind of forever. If this resonated and you'd like to support the channel in a special way, tap the thanks button below the heart with the $sign. With super thanks, you can make a direct contribution that helps me keep creating videos you love.